を守るため。
So I finished out Jeanne, and I had a great time with it. It's made by Broccoli, where if you're old enough, you'll either get hit by nostalgia from either like Galaxy Angel or maybe Digichar, but I think that's even older. The VN is just kids going through theater with different plays. They struggle getting into character to break through their self-imposed ideals or their limits, and they're just training in general. The pacing and the voice acting hard carries this VN, considering some of the downsides I'll go over later. There's 4 classes, one that specializes in dancing, another for vocals, one for geniuses, and another where it feels like it's just for the rest, but I assume it's for the people that seem to have like multiple talents. At first I thought maybe it was like the class that specializes in acting, since you know they do most of the plays and they're the ones that always gets focused, but I guess that just wasn't the case. And it's like, yeah, they have a lot of talents, but they're just not on the level of Amber, which was like the genius class. It's technically an otome, but I guess I have a weird way of saying what is and what isn't an otome VN outside of like the rigid definition of like, oh, it's just a mating game where the MC must be a girl and there must be cute boys to choose from. Where I mainly consider if the plot itself is written in a way to specifically market to women, like pretty much all of the Yuri parts I've read felt like they were just written for dudes. I'm assuming some BL titles will sell better for dudes and some will sell better for women as well. It's depending how you write it. I technically read one a decade ago or more by accident, and the plot was actually really great there too. It's actually one of my favorite VNs. I think I have like a 8 or a 7. Tangent aside, this is more of something you can read with your friends or your family and not seem weird. Consider it like you're reading a VN based on Haikyuu or something, or maybe one of those like basketball animes or whatever. Honestly, I'd give it like a 10 if it was just like a kinetic experience instead of having all these routes, because it just takes a while. Some of the character art is kind of jank, but it's an art style that can differentiate from the rest, and I'm pretty cool with that. The worst things are maybe like the mouths and maybe some of the character spreads from when it's not in the CG, it's worse. When it's in the CG, it's actually really well done. The worst offender is probably Suzu, and that's probably your first route if you're going for all of them. I'll go over the routes later, but the antagonist is probably the second worst offender, but honestly, it really fits what he's going for. He just looks really weird, but he's also like the maximum genius, so I was like, yeah, this works. The character traits are kind of templates, but and you see most of them, like you got Suzu, the sporty / charismatic loud one, and Yanaga is the timid smart one that could be transferred to Amber if you really wanted to after the first year, because he's fucking amazing. Umi's like the dancing fuckboy that has more going on. Hyde's the gloomy supportive one, he generally elevates the rest of the cast. Mitsuki's the no nonsense one, he just does vocals. And then there's Neji, just the weird one, right? I thought Neji was going to be my favorite character, considering I normally enjoy the weirdo of the group, and I guess it kind of was if you consider the main cast, but he wasn't my favorite route. Which is also generally the case. Their routes are usually not the best, but they're usually fine and important, though he is my favorite to listen to, and whenever he's singing, I think he did a lot better than some of the other characters. My favorite character ended up being the side character from the vocal class, Kito. At first I thought maybe it would have been a Tori, who's kind of like the asshole at the start, but then eventually like, oh, he's kind of supportive here and there, and he's just funny. Honestly, he deserves more screen time, but it's generally just like a fun time when he's around. I think a lot of it is that Kito and the people around him reminds me of myself and a couple of my other friends. So it's like a comfort pick. I think most people would gravitate towards like Kai and his route. But when it's about acting, then Yonaga eventually just steals the show. That helps a lot with his character, because otherwise he's one of the more boring ones too. The VN loops between training on the weekdays to raise your stats and hanging out with a set of options on the weekend, they grow the longer you play. So like in the beginning you only have like the main cast, but later on you have all the side characters, and sometimes you have other characters you're like, who the fuck are you? And then later you enact the play, and normally that's like 2 months. I think once a little bit under 2 months, and summer I think it's almost 3 months. You generally have 3 rhythm-like games every play. They're pretty easy, so I'm not sure how many you can fail before you just fail getting into a route, but considering they give you the option to restart from the beginning of the play if you don't get max in the finale, you probably do the same thing if you play like something that's actually important. I think that's like the second play. Yeah, because otherwise, yeah, it's a story point, you'll get to it. Either way, you hang out with a specific character long enough to get their scenes, so they become like a route you can choose, whilst also leveling up the stat that they represent them. The characters and the stats are pretty much in a linear line, so you shouldn't be confused on like what links to what. So it's like, oh, Spirit, oh, what the fuck does Spirit do? It's the first one, who's the first character? Suzu, alright, they both link, and it's no shit. I think you have to hit the stat cap for that specific one to get the best ending, otherwise you're stuck with like the good ending, which I assume just means you don't get the epilogue. The epilogues normally aren't great. Some of them are fine actually, but I think 2 or 3 are like kind of shit. But the routes themselves are really what hampers the VN. The routes themselves aren't really special. They consist of maybe like 5% each, and that's still adding like the final play itself is around like 80% the same. There are enough differences that make them unique, but still consist of you needing to replay the whole common route again. And this includes making different training choices and hanging out with different people and doing the rhythm games every time. So if you go with 100%, you're going to play these mini games like 130 to maybe 145 times. Fuck, holy shit. I got really good at them after a while, to the point I can watch YouTube and get like the double S score at the same time on expert. The Jeanne difficulty is still kind of hard. And this really pads up the playtime from like 40, maybe 50 hours to go around like 70 to 80. Honestly, it's one of the few VNs where I'd say it's just better doing 1 or 2 routes than just leaving it at that. The best ones being Yonaga, Kai, and the main characters route. You get the most mileage out of those, and you can come out of it with like a 10 and a lot of save time. You can't unlock the true best ending this way, but I don't think you'll miss a lot. You can probably just look it out on YouTube. It's like under 10 minutes long. So like I said before, the routes are pretty short. Each one starts during Christmas and ends in like maybe 2.5 months afterwards. The play itself is the same with some deviations because whoever you choose gets the lead role, so it has to be changed a little bit. The antagonists and their place also change depending on your route alongside who gets focused on. So in one case you have like one kid and another one, sometimes like they're both together. You'll get to it. It's probably one of the better parts of each route, I guess. Suzu's route is the worst one because it's basically just a starter route. It has more of the Otome feel and I don't really care for it. I do feel like there's a lot of potential in some of his scenes, but I don't focus on him or his POV while that was happening. I think it would have done a lot better like in a TV show. On the other hand, this route does cover the other classes first year, so you can still get something from there. Yonaga's route is one of the best ones. The dude is straight up a method actor, then you can go through his benefits and how it can fuck you up at the same time, but eventually gives focus to everybody else in the class, and it was done stupidly well. It's more of an inclusive approach where it focuses on the characters you already know and how he's proud of knowing them and amazed at what they can do. I liked it a lot. Mitsuki's route is also one that doesn't really have much to write home about, but it does cover the feelings of like the second years and against like the antagonist. And considering that covers Kito, who's my favorite, I can't really bash it, it was fine. Fumi's route is more on his feelings toward his family and the business they have. Basically the conflict of wanting to be free, enjoying however he wants to dance and making new dances, but also respecting like, oh, my family has all these traditions and we respect the style as well. It also pays more attention to Otori, and not a whole lot, but I still appreciate it. It's like, hey, he has more lines, here's a new scene for him, awesome. It was a good scene. I just wish there was more of him, but whatever. Kai's route is similar to Yonaga's route. The difference is instead of being like a child in awe of the rest of the group, Kai's just proud of what's basically his children, how much they've grown. Outside of that, the route is more about himself, but also gives some focus to the main character's brother and his weasel that you see around in the common story. He's basically the best route in the bunch, but he's also just kind of like the dad of the group. Neji's route is interesting, but also kind of shallow. It's one of those things where he deserves more time to make the content shine considering what's happening. There's a couple times you see in other routes where like, oh, what does this mean? What's he doing? And you know, that gets explained, but it's like, oh, the lead up wasn't as great as I thought it would be. And a lot of it's like, they don't have time for it. The main character's route is probably the best case scenario if you just want to do one route. You have enough time in the weekends to hang out with all the side characters and get all their CGs while also losing not a lot from the main cast in terms of like team dynamic. You lose like the romance things and like their connections and crap, but otherwise like, yeah, whatever. The things you get from the plays and them training is enough for you to go through. It's basically like the team dynamic that you understand from the plays are still there. What you like about them are still there. You don't really lose a lot through the routes. This route covers why she's there and what's going on underneath the base plot. It's also where you can get a bad ending and join like the antagonist. It was pretty cool. It's really short, but one of the effects was, you know, it was fun. Overall, I'm giving this a 9, but really deserves something closer to an 8 with how much time they make you waste just to see the other routes. But it's really not an indication of the writing, but a poor hindsight of what you consider quality of life improvements. If you pick one of the better routes and just leave it at that, then just get a 10, right? It's kind of different than the case like giving Little Busters 10 because of a frame, because you're still forced to do all the routes. But really, this is more like, I understand why some people give this a 10, more so than me giving it 1. To me, it's like, I do everything. The quality of the VN is more so on the pacing than the plot itself. The plot is kind of basic. There's been titles with a good premise or has like great moments all around, but the pacing's somewhat dreadful and you can only read it like an hour at a time before I have to do something else. This one is just an enjoyable time with properly paced high impact moments just to keep you going. I think I did the comment around in like 2 or 3 days. It was great. So now it's more about the spoilers. There's not a lot of them. It's more like little things I've seen here and there, and a lot of things I can explain why it's done this way, so it's not even complaints. It's like, it's there, I noticed it, but also whatever. Like the title itself didn't feel like it wanted to do anything with the drama, and that's like a thing that I think it wanted to do. It wanted to do like, here's all these common man conversations and these topics, just people talking to each other and having fun, and it's like, this is great. And generally like a lot of the drama just felt shallow because of that. But there's a thing, it's like, yeah, I understand why you did it this way. I don't know why you included drama to begin with, but if you know, it's like, yeah, it's just a thing to make a character more unique, and that's it. And like sometimes it even felt like it was forgotten, like Mitsuki's route, which was like the vocal guy, where he joined the drama school just to get away from his mom because his mom's kind of a piece of shit and just wants to use him to like as like a little toy thing. It's like, hey, my friends, look at my kids singing and that shit. But then it never gets brought up again. And it's like, okay, that was a waste of a point. This also happens with Neji, where like I think I said before, where it's like his initial conflict is done well, but how he loses all his inspiration that leads him to lose all his like instinctual talent and asks the rest of the team to help him out and like, oh, teach me how to do these things, is because he's like a freaking genius and he didn't learn the proper way. So when he loses all his talent, he's like, I have no idea what to do shit anymore. But all of this was really done fast. It's like, oh, 20 minutes later, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of know what to do. And by the end, it's like, oh, I got all my talent back, because what he was worried about is it's like kind of gone now. And it's like, this could have been a better point, but it's not. And it's one of those things where it's like, this was kind of shown in other routes where it felt like they're leading to like he was gonna die or he has cancer or something, because they like doing that too in these K-drama things. But it's like, no, he was just worried. It's like, oh, when I fall for someone I lose my talent, because my dad also lost all his talent through this way. And it's like that's his route, and it was interesting, but it's also like, mainly like I've seen this done before and it was done better. It's more of that. I feel like I must have messed up somewhere and I didn't get all the Tori scenes, because he has a lot of potential but becomes like more of a background character that has like a name and that's it. I get it's a consequence of him not asking for help a lot, so it's like a way of doing things, of not melding well with a team dynamic. It's like, well, you're not doing what the team wants to do, so you get less screen time and therefore you just don't get like an ending or something. But I think a lot of it's, I must have missed like a scene or two so he doesn't get an ending scene or something. Like the last time he got a scene was like in Fumi's route or something, and it's like, yeah, it's a good scene. I wish I had more of this. And the last bit is on Suki, which is like the MC's brother, MC's Kisa. I don't think I mentioned it throughout the whole review. Like you can tell that he's the weasel from the like, not the start, but in the common route, maybe like in the second chapter or something. You can already kind of tell like, oh, that's him. And then it gets more solidified in like Kai's route, and then it just gets confirmed in the final ending, I think. And I'm usually a fan of like implied storytelling, but I think I'm missing a piece of the puzzle this time around. And I'm assuming it's like a reference to some old theater thing, or maybe it's like a myth about old theater or something, because there's a lot of references to old theater all around. It's like, it's probably something I'm just missing. So something like, maybe because he has so much talent and he has the same talent as the MC, where he can change his whole character, and maybe he gave too much of himself to acting, right? So now he's like a super empty vessel thing, and then something just possessed him or some crap, and I don't think that's what it is. He stopped being human. Or it could be referencing to this play that Chui does, where the female lead like sacrifices everything she has to summon the god, and maybe that's what Suki was doing, but I really don't think so. I think it's more of just a reference to some weird old theater thing. It's like, yeah, of course this is it. And if you don't know about it, it's like the stupid book I read a long time ago, where the only way you found who the main culprit is if you know tennis, because fucking backhand whatever. It's like, wow, that pissed me off so much. My favorite plays ended up being the second and third one, but more so on the third. Each play has something unique to it, and generally it's getting carried by the voice actors. The themes of the plays are kind of interlinked between them all, but the general one is always increasing the repertoire of roles or just creating rivalries between each other. Part of the first play is to set up the foundation for Suzu and Yonaga's rivalry that ferments at the start of like chapter 2 and explodes at chapter 3, and it becomes like a main theme going on for the last two chapters. It's one of those things where they're both envious of what each other has, and how if they had X, then they'd have less of a hard time trying to keep up with their seniors or even with Kisa. The rivalry itself is not really written in like a heavy or dark tone. It's something they just go through, and it's something they acknowledge of each other, where they see each other as something to jump through before competing with against Kisa, who they both see as more talented and were just more further ahead of themselves. The second play introduces the vessel and the flower concept, where one role is to prop up the other one, but outside of that, it's just to shake up Kai's way of thinking, considering he's always imprisoning himself into like the vessel role. This leads to the fourth play and also the fifth play during his own route, where he gets roles that either take the lead or have something that makes the play even more like thought-provoking. Because in the end of the fourth play is the last shown character wanting his own mugwort. The mugwort is like part of the play, don't worry about it, but it's basically saying like he's also in this town, and therefore he's also belongs in this debauchery crap, and also wants to keep on going. He's one of them. Like, he's always the actor as well. He's not just someone to support everybody. He's like, look at me too. Basically saying, yeah, he's just done with staying in the passive role. Fumi kind of is the same thing happening in chapter 3, where it becomes a theme of freedom to do what they want to achieve on stage and how to expand what the audience can expect. This also sets up his own rivalry with Kisa, mainly considering she's the first one to light a fire up his ass after Suki. You can consider the cast on the third plate to represent the course class in general. Fumi's enormous talent forces him to be responsible in carrying the rest of the cast and how that shackles him. How Kai's Jack Ace is basically made because Fumi is around, and at the same time you have Kisa and like Suzu / Yonaga killing the old way of doing things. By the end of the play, Fumi still wins whilst losing the majority of his baggage and constraints, which is represented by the dolls they had and how they become human and also fended off the antagonists. So Fumi's basically saying is like, hey, I still have the experience to keep myself at the top, but I finally got something to compete against, so fight me in this pedestal. So basically he just has a reason to keep on improving now because hey, I have fuel competition again between the class. Kisa's theme encompasses all the plays, but they're more apparent in chapter 4 and 5, more so on 4 where it reaches a boiling point, and it's basically the highlight for Mutsuki as well, considering he's kind of just been around and he's just like the vocal advisor until this point. He eventually becomes the class leader, and that generally becomes Mutsuki's thing. He never really cared to be part of the group and was fine just being in the corner even though Fumi and Neji kept pestering him to join him for random crap. So it's the point on just as how the first years and the third years reached out to Mitsuki, he's also finally wants to do the same thing thanks to Kisa and how he can now accept her even though he's kind of figured out what she's doing. And Neji is actually an interesting one because it's one of those things that you wouldn't even think about until it's brought up. So in every play, he always plays like the weirdo or character that does whatever they want that brings them joy and success. And he's a weirdo, so you wouldn't really think much of it. It was already brought up that he already takes lesser roles and handles the same like type role considering he's always basically doing everything else. But then it gets revealed in his route that his dad was having an affair with this lady of like a similar demeanor. He was basically traumatized to the point that he's scared of women and the only female role he can play is one that makes fun of his dad's mistress. And the funny is that dad was no longer able to write anything, and Neji believes it's because all of their thoughts are getting funneled into just thinking about their love interest, and the dad eventually dies by drowning, so Neji's basically scared out of his mind about ever finding someone he loves as well because he considers like, shit, this is gonna happen to me because he's also the same like type of genius as his dad. So in his logic, he'd also lose his ability to write or get into character, and he knows that it'll set him off to throwing himself into the ocean as well, just like his dad. Problem is, like I said before, all this really happened quickly during his route, and it's one of those things where if you just give it another hour, I think I would have liked this a lot more. It's one of those things like, because there's more happening but also the same time constraint, it makes it worse than what Kai had or what Yonaga had, and it's like this is technically has more content than what they had, but in the end like it's not as much because of it. And that's basically it for Jacques Jeanne. I don't know which ones could be next. Technically another Tomi was supposed to be before this one and it just never happened. It's pretty much done. I just wanted to put this one out first. If not that, it'll be like still of the end, and after that one I'm probably just gonna be busy with the tier lists because those take a while as well.